After much research, I was looking for a kit for my Mustang that would eliminate the strut rod and provide upper and lower A-arms. Not a lot of choices, but I ended up with the CPP kit with front and rear shocks. This kit was very reasonably priced at, and I bought it off of eBay. You can order directly from CPP by buying through eBay. I was able to save on the shipping. I ordered on March 20th approximately, and about 2 months later the kit showed up and everything looked great. The quality is extremely high. The Viking items are very, very nice. Everything is nicely powder coated and the welds look great. You have everything that you need to install this in the kit. The Viking shocks come with a lot of items. Some of them you actually won't use, like the upper collars, but everything else that you need is in the kit here. This kit also comes with an optional thrust bearing. You place that between the two washers, and that's what allows you to easily adjust the spring height. And as it says in the instructions, lube generously with anti-seize. The lower shock mount comes pre-assembled, but you do need to assemble the upper shock mount. To do that, you have a circlip, and once you install the circlip, a little bit of pressure gets to the seat. One of the few components that I did need to get is an upper spring isolator. You can just use a stock piece for that. The rear shock installation is very straightforward, exactly the same as for any other rear shock you might install, although you do have the advantage of now full double adjustability. As I stated, my goal was to remove the strut rod from the suspension equation, and to do that you do have to remove the strut rod bracket. I started by drilling out the spot welds for the strut rod brackets and then broke out the air chisel. That made pretty short work of the situation. Not the prettiest deconstruction. Most of the spot welds came off pretty easily. Some of them fought me a little bit more, but in the end it gets all covered up with the bracket from CPP. So I was pretty happy with the results. Most importantly, those strut rods were gone. The next step was to get the plate into position. You pretty much line it up against the front of the radiator support. And then you install the lower A-arm, and that'll give you your final placement for that front plate. You want to make sure that that arm swings smoothly. Once you've done that, you can transfer the holes and drill them out. And then you just basically start drilling and bolting. It's a pretty simple process. You do have to maybe remove things like the fender brace, but everything goes back together pretty well. I will say the ones underneath the radiator were tricky. There is a video out there that shows a better process that I looked at after I did this. But once you get everything together, you want to make sure again that lower A-arm moves smoothly. But really it's a true bolt-on installation here. At the same time I did the Shelby drop. Now I'm not sure if this is actually required, but I went ahead and did it anyways. There are eccentric washers for the lower suspension mounts. These aren't actually used on the 65 and 66 Mustangs. You reuse your original spindles for this kit. Mine fought me pretty well, but eventually I did win, and now I'm starting to get the different pieces back together here. Although not part of this kit, I highly recommend moving to at least a 1-inch sway bar. it'll make a massive improvement to the handling on top of the already excellent CPP kit.
Overall, the installation was actually pretty smooth. Didn't experience a lot of hiccups. Just methodically going through and following the instructions and making sure everything aligned. That's one of the big keys, just lining things up. But overall, it was great. When you are done, you may have leftover parts depending on what your Mustang you have, but the pile should be relatively small. And of course, after installing this suspension kit, I wanted to make sure I could go out and test it properly. And what better way than to autocross? Now, I'd never autocrossed before, but it certainly gave me a great chance to feel how the suspension is working, and it works great. By eliminating the strut rod, you no longer have suspension deflection like the stock Mustangs have. You have a super smooth and very controllable ride now. I now have a ton of confidence in the handling on this car. There's more adjustability that I can play with the shocks, but that's part of the fun. At the same time of doing the suspension, I made sure that all the steering components were also brand new. That also improved the handling quite a bit. While more expensive than a stock rebuild of the suspension, it's certainly less than a lot of the high-end kits that are out there. Certainly a great value for the money, and I continue to look forward to more test drives.